Imagine opening your email to find years of history deleted. Only a single email remains. A ransomware request for $2 million. You think to yourself, how could this happen to me? You see, there's two types of companies. Those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. The weight of responsibility comes crashing down on you. It's the sort of responsibility you feel when your family is craving a delicious pizza. You finally open the box only to find the most cringe-worthy topping that you mistakenly ordered. Join Pineapple on Pizza podcast as John and George, along with guest executives, discuss the most common and craziest cybersecurity risks, followed by actionable tips and strategies that can be implemented to protect your cyber risk pie. Pineapple on Pizza is hosted by Omnistruct.
Welcome to another episode of Pineapple on Pizza. Today we have an amazing guest who is the Chief Technology Officer for Mainsail Industries. Welcome, Brad Sollar. We always start off our questions here with our key question, and it's this. If cyber risk was a pizza and frameworks are the crust, what's the riskiest topping you've ever seen, and what topping would you equate that to?
So, love pizza, by the way. I would say one of the riskiest things, and I kind of break this always into two things with security. So it would probably be anchovies, and I would say, just because that's not a top favorite topping of mine. I do like pineapple though, by the way. I love it with bacon. You got to have the American bacon, not the Canadian stuff. Sorry. But what I would say with one of those the riskiest things that I see all the time is just simple misconfigurations, right? I think that there's a ton of people that will go and deploy infrastructure, deploy their applications, and kind of just think that's it, right? When just a little bit more work, can ensure that things are configured properly. And one of the things I think that helps with that the most is using automation, right? Because once you understand automation, you're going to be a lot more likely to just automate deployments as well as doing updates, right? Updates and patching. I always think of those as really kind of the low-hanging fruit, but honestly, the most highest impact for an organization.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen on that is that the system administrator or whatever is getting things up, and then once they get it up and they go, oh my God, it's working, and then they get that fire call and they get run off to something else, and so that security just never happens. And I think that's definitely one of those issues.
Yeah, those are always the I think the low-hanging fruit for me, especially as a new company standing up infrastructure, doing a lot of stuff on-prem, and then when you go into the cloud, you're like, okay, well now this is public facing for everyone to bang on. So we're always thinking about ensuring that starting meeting compliance at a start, right, as a bare minimum, right? And then I would say I like to get into the real security of things, right, to prove something is actually secure. And that's kind of the second part of my answer is that the things that really keep me up at night are the stuff that are the really focused APT style, advanced persistent threats, targeted threats, where someone is constantly, you're a target, and I'm going to continue to attack you until you slip up. I find some 0 day or something, and I get in, or one of your people answer the phone or my email or something, right? So those are the things where I think it's not your average consumer is really going to be able to understand and be able to protect systems at that level. And that's a lot with what we're as a company really trying to do is make security simple, especially at the lower layers, right? The really hard things.
So tell us a little bit more about that. What's the solution that you've developed to help those customers secure that?
So we are bringing the first Type 0 hypervisor to market. Everyone's familiar with Type 2. That was like your VirtualBox or VMware Player kind of running on an operating system, right? Nobody really does that for production. Everyone's really down at a type 1, which is a stripped down Linux, usually Linux operating system to run virtualization. That's your AWS, your Azure, your VMware, all of those types of hypervisors. We're really focused specifically on the edge market. So that means, and edge is a loose term, right? So we define edge as really anything outside of the public data center or public cloud, right? So anything that's out, kind of at the edge. And what we're doing is, since we're at a type 0, we're actually launched from firmware, and we don't have an orchestrator. So basically, our hypervisor is able to provide hardware-based isolation for running all the workloads that you're running out at the edge anyway. So like the 5G, AI, ML, and all of those types of things. And then we're wrapping it with really next-gen security. But at the same time, we're trying to make this as simple as possible, right? Like nobody that I really know goes and says, let me check the firmware on this server and make sure that they're enforcing secure boot and all of these other things. So, and that's just something we're doing by default, right? So again, trying to make security simple for the average consumer, especially when you're outside of the cloud protections, right? Where you've got a whole SOC and a whole team that's looking after things.
Right. We've definitely seen that. And so what's your biggest challenge in meeting those regulatory requirements today?
A lot of the regulatory requirements, there's just so many of them, I think, is where we really, you almost get analysis paralysis when you start to say, okay, like I have a system like for the DoD, if I was going to accredit it, there's so many things that you have to worry about from cryptography, from FIPS, from meeting like NIST 800-53 or Zero Trust 800-207, and it goes on and on and on. And it's really, what is, I think a lot of times, what is kind of your government customer's main concern too? Because you can build an RMF ATO package and get that thing approved. But then at the end of the day, there's also I'll go back and say again, real security on that. And are you meeting that compliance as well? Right. So there's just a ton of things, and especially trying to navigate that as a small company can be incredibly difficult.
And what do you consider a small company from that standpoint?
I would say anywhere under, $10 million, right? From, your smaller, under 50 people, I would say, especially when you start talking about having to get CMMC certification done as a business, where, if you're not doing it yourself, you're usually hiring an auditor, and the pricing for that can be, almost the price of hiring another person. Right. So depending on your size and scale, if you're larger, those are going to be known costs to you anyways. But I mean, if you're trying to get into a market as a smaller company, those can definitely be a little bit challenging.
So how does Mainsail help with that for the smaller businesses? I mean, obviously the hypervisor, but I mean, let's make it so that the business owner understands that the person, because obviously the person that's a $10 million company probably isn't dealing with the hypervisors on their normal day-to-day basis, right? So,
right.
So tell me, give me the high level of how Mainsail helps with that.
So at a high level, one of the things that we've done is we've done a lot of the NIST mappings for like Zero Trust, especially down at the compute layer. A lot of times people look at Zero Trust as a network-based construct. People kind of looked at Google's Beyond Corp and, not using VPNs anymore and those kinds of things. So, then I think on the network side of things, it's a lot clearly understood in terms of compliance and those kinds of things. But down when you actually start talking about the compute, these are things in the NIST guidebooks and DoD guidebooks are not exactly having people really worried about until 2027, 2030. That's what they're calling Zero Trust Advanced, right? For NIST 800-207. One of the things we're doing is actually we've done our mappings to NIST for advanced compute. So we're actually able to help organizations meet those compliances for compute now. And the other thing is, so we're based on top of Red Hat. So, Red Hat, I'm a former Red Hat solutions architect, especially around security. Great thing with that operating system is they've gone and done common criteria, FIPS certification for the crypto modules. They have Ansible playbooks can help you configure to meet like NIST 853 and several other ones, right? Or any other compliance matrix that you're going under. So trying to put all that together, what we're trying to do is have really turnkey solution so that if someone is trying to meet compliance, you can at least by taking your application, you're running it on top of us, hopefully there's some level of, inheritance that you'll be able to, if you're going at least in the government speak, you'd be able to inherit and maybe have an official start to look at inheriting some of the controls that we'd be able to provide.
Okay. Your solution as a business owner, how does that change things now? I mean, what's the, you mentioned that does it bring down the cost? Does it bring down the time to market? Obviously, it does help with the regulatory part. I mean, we got that with the 800-207 and 853. But can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So when we talk about cost, cost can manifest itself in a lot of different ways, especially as a business owner, right? You might start with one solution and then finally realize, oh, I need to hire maybe a couple of people when you start growing in terms of like a SOC, like network monitoring, security monitoring, all compliance and all of these types of things. And then looking at, oh, well, I need to have, a SIEM or an IDS and host intrusion devices and, they can XOR and SOAR and all of these things. And that bill can really start to grow over time. One of the things that we, offer with our solutions, we have actually, built-in exploit protection, right? So again, trying to help, we work in conjunction with a lot of those tools. So if you want to bring those as an extra layer, great. But in terms of, starting from a secure foundation, we're trying to really help lower the security costs for all the additional toolings that you might have to bring to a solution, right? So we're trying to help, bring down those costs from that perspective as well.
All right. So
gears are spinning in my head on this one. So mainly because they're really from an edge perspective anyway. Yeah. There's the traditional edge and then there's the modern edge, and what does that look like? So, but in concept, it makes a lot of sense. I think the interesting part, and just kind of a follow-up question: have you heard of FirstNet from AT&T? You know what that is?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's allegedly, call it one of the first private nets, right, for first responders. Right. So I always think about those situations, and whether you have a private net or you have a public internet or whatever you're presenting, right? That you still have this edge problem and its many derivations, so to speak. So, do you have a specific market that is really going to be, that you think is really going to be embracing, or markets that might be embracing it? Because, FirstNet was obviously just an example of focused on first responders.
Absolutely. We kind of see it as really we're coming from the DoD. So of course, DoD is really our first market. We see a definite use case with that. You'll see we've done a lot of work with the Army futures and looking at where they're trying to go with their unified network. They're doing a lot with SD-WAN and 5G and all of these types of things. And it's still a core component of that is the servers and devices that they run on, and being able to secure those when they're out at the tactical edge. And you also have to worry about physical protection, things where someone actually has control of the hardware. And if in most traditional senses, if someone has control of the hardware, they usually win, right? They're able to do something to, basically get inside. Especially with like confidential compute, one of the things is if you're able to pull the memory from a server, and especially when we start talking about terabytes of memory, Basically, you can pull the memory, plug it into another machine, and then basically read what was on that. So with us, another thing we enable is confidential compute, which actually blocks those types of attacks. Now, we think that a lot of that, those markets that are out there, that don't have those physical protections are, for the DoD is definitely one market. But we also look at, finance, oil and gas, and critical infrastructure. Because if you look at, especially, the kind of oil and gas with, some of the pipeline attacks that have happened, and ransomware. Well, to get ransomware, you have to have some kind of exploit, right? And one of the things that we're able to stop a lot of is these types of exploits that happen. So we definitely see, oil and gas is out in remote areas and remote settings, and who knows when's the next time someone's actually going to drive by and pick that box up and do something with it, right? So, we see that, since we're trying to provide this, this full stack protection from the silicon all the way to the application runtime, we think that that's a good feature, good set of features that a lot of those markets would definitely be interested in, especially when we're talking about, very critical, safety conscious, industries.
Yeah. And we've seen that in what's called the white box switching market as well. So where, new protocol designs are being established and, using a white box switching kind of a platform. And, from the common, Cisco's of the world to, unique deployments. And that hypervisor problem is I know something that's considered the stability of the network itself, traffic in motion versus traffic at rest situation. Mm-hmm. So I just can imagine the number of different applications that might exist that go beyond just what essentially is DoD and some of the manufacturers of some of the products that the DoD might acquire, and and how things like, and it's just one of many examples, white box switching might apply. So yeah, that's it sounds extremely open in terms of where you might be able to go next. And so I'm just curious how, what the vision might be as you get beyond just DoD.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that we've done is we've partnered with Red Hat, and we have reference architectures where we're able to run things like OpenShift on top. And one of the great things with this kind of architecture is now, since we're providing this hardware-based isolation, we can run low latency and real-time operating systems all on this platform now, because you can't really do that on traditional virtualization. There's just too much interference between the context switching and sharing of resources between virtual machines. But since we're using hardware-based isolation, we can get incredible determinism and quality of service. So now you can actually reduce the space, weight, and power by being able to run, like software-defined radios, 5G, all of these things on, like an OpenShift platform, and be able to use all the modern DevOps and DevSecOps techniques to deploy your application. But this just adds another kind of architectural tool in your tool belt for designing systems. Yeah. And so we're really at the infancy right now of this kind of new type 0 hypervisor. And we've got a lot of partners right now that are, trying to use this to build all different types of things on it.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing where that evolves. So, yeah.
So, Brad, what events are you going to? How does somebody learn more about the hypervisors that you're creating and the technology?
Yeah, we've been attending a lot of AVSEA events. We actually just came back from AVSEA West, which is a Navy event. And we had a booth there with Western Digital Federal. So most people know Western Digital, might not know Western Digital Federal. They're a newer group within them, and they are making purely customized hardware for the edge. So we've partnered with them because they have ruggedized and hardened servers. They're just fantastic for this edge use case. So we've been so a lot of the AVSEA events, and we are looking at a couple more events. Basically, the FCA one, so there's probably Baltimore Cyber, and I believe that's in October. And there's AUSA. We will definitely have a booth next year.
Great. And what books would you recommend for learning more about this?
So one of my favorite books that I have been reading recently is there's a whole series of books from an author called Spark Flow. It's not even a real name; it's a pen name. So he uses that pen name to be vivid with his writing. But essentially, he takes you through a lot of hacking scenarios. So looking at very secure industries and how to hack into them, like it's fictitious, right? But it's really fantastic because he takes you from the attacker's perspective, from how to set up anonymous connections to how to bypass certain security controls, and basically just walk all over a network and the things that an attacker would do. And I'm making those actually at least one or two of them. There's one called Hack Like a Ghost. That is one is required reading for all my engineers. And it's mainly just so that people can get inside the mindset of how little misconfigurations can really end up, leading to massive, security breaches. But those are a great series of books.
And so, what excites you about the future? What do you see? What do you see coming, and what excites you?
So one of the things, at least for us, is getting our message out. Right, we've been so we spent a lot of time kind of in stealth mode as a startup, and now we're finally out there getting ready to promote our product Metalvisor. And looking at building out new reference architectures and seeing what people are building on top of us. It is incredibly exciting to see people, take something that you've built and, start to incorporate it into everything that they're doing. So that's just fantastic. As we look towards the future, we're looking at really proving out some real thought leader things that we're actually doing with the Aerospace Corporation. They're an FFRDC, like a MITRE, out in El Segundo in their multi-level security lab. So we're trying to be thought leaders and showing that hardware-based isolation is something that can actually host multiple levels of security. And hopefully in the future that'll be something we might be able to come back and talk on your show about.
All right. Tell us more about you. So where did you come from? I mean, how did you get this experience? You mentioned a little bit about Red Hat. You mentioned some other things, but kind of tell us, from high school on. Well, maybe not high school. Let's go to college, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I would consider my first real job was to join the Army, right? So I was airborne. I was a radar technician. That was really how I first really got into computers and electronics. I started on some pretty old, actual Navy radars that they were throwing away, and the Army picked up. So we'll take them. So I worked on those with old transistor tubes and very high voltage. So then we eventually went into more digital, tactical radars and whatnot. So from there, I really got into, getting into computers and networking. And when I went to school, came out. I was lucky enough to get a shift job working as an IDS analyst. So I spent a lot of that time really learning from people that are, experts, already knew a lot of things, and got some SANS training and really got into cybersecurity. I'll really say that my cyber career really took off when I was able to work with INSCOM, First IO. They're actually now part of AR Cyber. Yeah. But as Army Command, and I worked there as a contractor. And what we did was a lot of, teaching offensive cyber as well as how to defend against it. So on a lot of red blue teaming type of things. So that was fun for a long time. I did that. And then I actually got a job. I got an offer at MITRE, again in FFRDC, and this was right when the cloud was a huge thing, and I had just gotten certified as an AWS architect. So I was in super high demand there at MITRE, and was going across many different organizations. So that was really a great, kind of looking at bringing new technology into the government. And I really like doing that. So actually, when I got a call from Red Hat to become a solution architect, I jumped at it because that was right when containers and Kubernetes were coming out right around then, like 2013, 2014 timeframe. And so I worked in Red Hat public sector. And that was a blast because, containers were just this new concept. No one had an idea what it was. It was like,
Yep.
Is that a VM? Like, yeah, not really, but we had I did a lot of workshops and taught customers how to, take a monolithic application and break it into microservices. And then I really actually got into container security pretty heavily, which I, still to this day do a lot of, work around that on securing things. And then basically from there, I worked at a company called Presidio, tried my hand in commercial sales, found that it was still, I'm kind of DoD guy, and ended up finding my co-founder. And we basically started Mainsail when we, had both really, worked around this technology that we're bringing to market right now. He's Navy, I'm Army guy, so we settled on the Mainsail name. I was just compromised. You can have the Navy name.
Got it. So let me ask you this: if you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would it be?
I would say don't be afraid of specialization. I always was, when I was younger, I chased a lot of things that would come up like, oh, this is the new thing, the new technology, the new thing. You see people getting paid and they're going and doing it. But now being older and looking back and seeing certain people that have just solely focused in one area and become a subject matter expert, like that is also, I think incredibly valuable, because I've seen a lot of people that have, they can take that type of knowledge, start a business if they want, start an open source project, become a consultant. Like it's, again, there's no such thing, I believe, in like bad learning or any, wasting your time with that. But I do think if you specialize in one field, I do think that you can really reap the rewards rather than, being more of a generalist. But being a generalist can be good as well. But I do think having focus, it would have been a good kind of bit of advice I could have given myself.
I can definitely understand that.
Yeah, I can relate, I think. So
yeah. And both are needed. I mean, there's definitely problems that you walk into where a generalist is needed, because it just so wide, and then you can bring in those specialists for those needed pieces. So
yeah,
good point.
Yeah, it is, and I've been that. I was down the specialization path. I worked for a company called NTT.
Okay.
And I was the company's, and ended up being almost one of the key designers of ISDN.
Oh wow!
So, which of course, broadband, made that irrelevant over time. But the journey of pursuing something and specializing in something was always, for me, it was always a neutral. It doesn't matter who builds the technology. It's about the that's where I learned that it's about the right tool for the job rather than what vendor's name is on the front of the box. But there were some ways to innovate and specialize that mattered for a long time, right? And so, and once you get into the as you get into the space that you specialize in, you make connections, and that's really what ended up paying off, is the connections. At least in my career. And so there's nothing wrong with specialization. That would be something don't be afraid to focus.
Right.
Because even though ISDN kind of withered and died, It's when you're the go-to, you kind of, you build all these relationships, you get to learn other things as well. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. I've seen that at Red Hat too. Like there's, fortunate enough, that's such a great company to work for. If we had a problem, there was like, oh, you can go talk to Dan Walsh, he knows security containers, or this guy over here knows the kernel at, whatever level. And there was just, I think, a very flat organization to where you could reach out and talk to people. But again, like a lot of those relationships where, we're working on problems or customer issues together, there's still a lot of people from Red Hat, even to this day, I still talk with it. So definitely understand the deep connection, especially around, subject matter experts. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Choose your toppings, so to speak. Context of pizza, right?
Yeah.
There's more out there than you thought.
Boy, howdy. So Brad, in your spare time, what do you do?
So I've been writing a lot of white papers recently.
I said spare time. No, I'm just kidding.
When I have for fun, which I don't think I've had a lot of spare time since starting the company. But I do like to trade stocks and options and futures. So that was always something I've always been into. I like the mental challenge of it. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's like, why did I do that? But that is definitely, I would say, something that would be a bit of a passion, love-hate passion of mine.
So as long as you're not hanging out on Wall Street bets, right?
Yeah, no, not anymore.
Of course not. Nobody is.
I remember looking at it going like, these guys don't know anything. They're just...
No. Yeah. Agreed. All right. So tell us, Brad, how can somebody find you?
So I'm definitely around at mainsailindustries.com. I can definitely be reached, just Brad at Mainsail Industries. On LinkedIn, just Brad Sollar. I will be, we're launching a big social media push. So if anyone's following Mainsail Industries, we will be pushing out a lot more content. Hopefully we're doing a lot of joint branded things with, our partners. So Western Digital Federal with Red Hat and several other customer or partners of ours. So yeah, definitely we're going to try and be as active as possible on social. And again, it can be reached at Brad at Mainsail Industries.
All right. Well, Brad, thank you very much. It's been very informative and definitely technical in nature, but we definitely appreciate that. To our audience, we'd like to thank you for listening. If you've learned something today or laughed, tell somebody about this podcast. Again, Brad, thank you. And there it is. This has been another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza with your hosts, John and George. See you next time.
Thank you all for joining another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza. You can find show notes, links, and resources by visiting omnistruct.com/blog. And a huge thank you to all who are preventatively protecting organizations from cyber threats.